Chapter 5 30 Years Later 21st May 2038 Zach's 40th birthday. Angelic shafts of light shone across the ocean, over the tops of the distant mountains, through valleys and fields, and down into the town of New Haven, as the sun burst through the horizon, lighting up the rooftops of the buildings, trees, and roads. At the top of Appleton Hill in Ye Old Apple Tree Farm, a rooster stood up tall, flapped its wings, stretched its neck, then pushed out his chest, and let out a deafening cock-a-doodle-doo, breaking the silence across the sleepy town. The meteor drone flew around in its daily routine, checking for road congestion, traffic accidents, weather, temperature and barometric readings, and taking scenic photographs and other data for the early morning news report. As it buzzed through the sky, the camera on the meteor drone looked upon the solar-panelled houses, took a sunlit photograph of the Welcome to New Haven sign with its Winner of Green Scene of the Year award, then panned around to include the mist on the sea in the distance. The town was serene for the moment. It would soon be bustling with people. With its natural beauty and stance on recycling, solar power and clean emissions, New Haven had become a great place to live. Inside his apartment, Zach's eyes flickered open, and he looked around in the dimness of his room. "Holovision on," he called out. At the end of his bed, a shiny black bar, 4 feet long, 2 inches wide, and an inch high, activated. It emitted 2 beams of light from the top of the bar at each end. Each beam lit up at 45-degree angles, shining a beam of light towards the center of the hollow bar. When they met in the middle, they created a 3D holographic image. The holographic ray was showing a 3D music video from the 20s band Curves of Virox with their chart-topping rendition of Even Hate Needs Love. "Volume up," Zach instructed the holobar. As it got louder, he sat himself up in bed for a few minutes, gazing at the reruns, yawning and stretching. An alarm buzzed from somewhere in the flat. The lights in his bedroom illuminated, slowly to 50%, and Zach got out of bed. He walked into the bedroom and stood in front of the mirror. As the lights got slowly brighter, Zach stared at his reflection. The facial detection in the mirror's camera scanned the bleary-eyed man and stopped the alarm. A voice from the mirror spoke. "Good morning, Mr. Drummond, and happy 40th birthday." A picture of a simple-looking cupcake with a candle on it appeared on the screen, and the birthday song played. "Blow out the candles and make a wish," said the animated mirror. He paused for a moment, pulled a "go away" face, then flicked his hand away from him towards the mirror as if shooing a fly, waving the virtual cake away. The cake and the birthday message slid off the screen. "Here is today's outlook," the mirror announced, speaking in a female English accent. His ex-girlfriend never liked it, but he didn't care. He swept his fingers through his bed hair, styling it as his fingers slid through, and tried to stare, focusing on his hazel eyes at the 40-year-old man looking back at him. His eyes blurred at the mirror, but he could still see the well-trimmed black goatee. He blinked twice, and his autofocus contact lenses switched on, displayed the Luminet logo briefly, and adjusted themselves until he could see clearly. The enhancements in the new improved backlit eyewear helped his night vision. Very useful considering the lights were only at 50%, but even better when they auto-adjusted to the lower light. The mirror downloaded the information from the meteor drone and lit up with icons of the sun and clouds, temperature and weather forecast for the day in the top right-hand corner. It then covered the rest of the mirror with a virtual calendar, and the voice announced today's schedule whilst displaying it on the screen. He looked for a second, then shooed the calendar away once more, and proceeded with his early morning ritual, sliding out his ultrasonic toothbrush and inserting it into his mouth. He laid the sonobrush onto his tongue. It was a weird-looking lolly stick type thing with no bristles. With the handle of his sonobrush laying on his bottom lip, he gave the handle a gentle squeeze with his upper lip to jump it into action. Zack clicked the news icon on the mirror and waved the screen in a swiping motion to flick through the articles and the weather reports. The screen mimicked a book, and each swipe showed him the next article. A beeper on the sonobrush told him that his teeth were now clean, and he poured himself a glass of water, gargling to get rid of the sonic debris, then sprayed his mouth with some minty fresh. The sonobrush went back into the charging pot, and a beep confirmed it was cleaning while the ultraviolet light sanitized it. Back in the bedroom, he got himself dressed. He slid his arms into his favourite black shirt with white flecks and pressed the magnetic fasteners until they snapped firmly in place. Next, he took his wrist phone off the bedside table and draped it onto his wrist, snapping the magnetic clasp together. Aesthetically, it wasn't much to look at, just a black circle with a strap, which showed the time when you tapped it. But technologically, it was a magnificent work of bioelectronic microengineering. Powered by body warmth, it contained some hidden extras. Inside its sleek, black, non-important looking circular frame, the black disc had a Wi-Fi phone inside it. The user would activate the phone by tapping the watch face and talking to it, instructing who to call, adding a contact number and name, or asking for directions. And the built-in microphone would take the instructions and complete the desired task, instead of using a speaker that others could listen into. The underneath of the wrist phone's black dial would vibrate instead. It would then send these vibrations from the wearer's wrist across the hand and up to the tip of the finger using bone conduction. To listen to the call, the wearer would put the forefinger of the user's hand into their ear or touch their finger or hand anywhere on their face, and it would convert the vibrations to speech that only the wearer could hear. No one could overhear it because there was no speaker, the ultimate in privacy. The built-in microphone would then allow the caller to hear you. He eased himself into his black trousers with silver stripes down the seams and slid on his smart, black, bioplastic shoes, snapping the magnets together in the middle. Zack called out, privacy mode off, and the windows in the apartment unfrosted. The artificial lighting switched off as the room lit up with the sun's brightness. To say it lit up with the actual sun was not quite accurate, since the window was not a real window, but a large digital screen embedded in the wall to give the illusion of a window. The image itself was a live feed from the cameras on the outside of the building, helping give the illusion that the tenant at flat 142 5E Panada Drive, New Haven, was looking outside the window and not just at the brick wall at the next door neighbour's flat. This enhanced people's moods and helped the tenants live in cramped spaces that wouldn't have previously been possible. Digital well-being, they called it. Finally, he grabbed his ID fob pendant from the bedside table, gently placed the neck cord over his head, and hung the pendant underneath his shirt out of sight. And with a small, split-second buzz, it started up into life, powered from the warmth of his chest. He triple-clicked the center button of the ID fob, and a small vibration alerted Zack to the display on his luminettes, which told him that an auto cab was on its way. Walking into the kitchen, Zack glanced at the time on the front of the microwave display. 6:45 a.m. Time to go to work, he said to himself. Grabbing a berry pop bar from the basket in the fridge, He then made his way out of his apartment and down the stairs towards the street. On his way down, Zach's wrist vibrated and a text flashed up on his luminettes to tell him that the auto cab was only 1 minute away. The street was quiet, apart from the buzz of the meteordrome. As he waited, the brightness of the sun made the luminette contact lenses go dark, and the warmth was gentle on his hands and face. Getting into the autocab, he called out his intended destination. "Libros Antiques, Abernard Lane," he said to the driverless cab. "Certainly, sir," came the robotic reply of the vehicle, and it moved forwards down the street and turned left. A few minutes later, Zach arrived at his destination, and the vehicle stopped. "You have arrived. Autocabs has taken 17 EBITs as payment. Thank you for using Autocabs. Have a nice day." Zach got out of the car and walked towards the shop door where his brother was waiting for him. "Hey, Dylan, what brings you here?" asked Zach with a surprised look on his face. "You didn't think I would forget my little brother's birthday, do you?" Dylan replied. "I know you don't celebrate it, but I got something special for you. A table at Luigi's." A ping on a bell made them both look around. "Hey, Charlie." Zach looked at the postman on his new Velo bike. "Morning, Mr. Drummond," replied the postal worker with a big smile. He took out a large parcel from his postal bag, then pulled out a regular palm-sized box with an ID fob-shaped marking on it and passed it to Zach. "Please sign here," said the postman, passing the box to the store owner. Zach pressed his ID fob against it and thumbed the fingerprint reader to confirm the action. The electronic screen on the box lit up and then beeped to show that it confirmed the digital signature, and a confirmation text buzzed on Zach's wrist phone, showing up as a notification envelope in the top left corner of his luminettes. Charlie said goodbye, then got on his electro scooter and scooted off down the road to deliver more parcels. "I've got to go," said Dylan, checking his watch while jogging on the spot. "Will you be helping me at the shop today?" "Nah, I have to do some research for those books you want, and I need to get home and use my new computer instead of that crappy thing you've got." "It's not crappy, it's a classic," said Zach proudly. Dylan smirked. "See you tomorrow at 7 p.m. at Luigi's." "Yep, it's the best place in town," Dylan smiled. "Ha! It's the only place in town." Dylan jogged up the road. Zach fumbled with the ID fob, unlocking the door. He brushed against it, and some paint flaked off, reminding him that the job needed to be done months ago. Determined to do something about it this week, to keep his mind off his birthday and the terrible memories it held, he had a look around the shop front, studying it carefully. To give Libros Antiques a more authentic look and feel, the outside of the shop had been painted with a white undercoat on top of the bioplastic window frames. On top of the white undercoat was dark brown paint, textured to look like wood. Now, scuffed and worn after years of neglect, some of the undercoat had started to show. Old Man Frade had painted the window panes with a yellow tint to protect the books that originally stood in the window from the harmful rays of the sun, to secure the precious stock from smash and grab crimes and lower the insurance policy. Zach had recently removed the books from the windows and replaced them with LCD panels showing virtual bookshelves which included the shop's books. This meant he could update the display much faster by adding new books to the computer. Stuck to the inside of one of the window panes was a small sticker with PHPC certified. The owner of this establishment is a member of the Paperback and Hardback Protection Commission, emblazoned onto it. In a world where trees are now protected species, and paper is only allowed to be sold under license, Zach's shop was one of the few places left to hold books. The front door to the shop was also in the same style as the wood-look window frames, but instead of window panes, it had faux wooden panels. Its fake-looking letterbox was pointless since the postal system had been shut down years ago. The only difference was that the brass disc shape, trying to mimic a 5-lever keylock, had no key. Instead, there was a contactless locking system activated by the fingerprint reader and ID fob. Standing outside the shop, Zack held his ID fob against the fake-looking antique door lock, pressing his thumb into the fingerprint reader. A satisfying, unlocking clunk of big heavy doors made it obvious that the doors were now open, and he smiled, remembering that the custom unlocking sound heavy door 3.mp3 was now one of his main satisfying reasons for getting up and going to work in the morning. The door creaked open. The creaking sound and the books were the only authentic things in the shop. While most shop owners would have dealt with the irritating noise, Zack had decided not to bother, as he felt it added character. The inside of the shop was a simple square shape, with bookshelves from floor to ceiling, filled with paperbacks, hardbacks of different sizes, shapes, and colours, and a shop counter with more fake wood panelling. On the counter was a fake-looking phone, an old-fashioned answer machine, and a till which also hid an ID fob reader for book purchases. He laid the packages on the counter and looked at his collection of books, regarding them with pride. He was a part of something special, a heritage, and a part of that heritage was to ensure that the books are treated right in the future with any prospective buyers, but also remembering that life wasn't free and that he needed the money too. Sometimes books were scarce. The outstanding books were exceptionally rare and worth a lot of money. Some books were legendary, and you could retire if you sold them for the right price. Since the trees protection laws over 15 years ago, first editions could no longer be sold by law. Instead, they were kept in museums or archived in vaults for security. His shop had almost the same worth and value as the big jewelry shops, certainly in value. Zack's shop was one of the top grossing places in the town, and he did well from it from time to time. This week, however, was not one of those times. "Answer machine!" he called out. Nothing happened. He tried it again, and this time the machine lit up, as if waiting for the next command. "Play messages!" Again, nothing happened. "Please play the new messages," he shouted from across the shop floor in a slow, deliberate sentence to make sure the machine heard him properly. "You have 2 new messages," replied the machine in a robotic voice. "Would you like to play them?" it asked. "Yes, please play them," Zack replied, rolling his eyes in frustration, as he often did when he had to repeat commands to the archaic machine. From the top of the machine, a square of light projected onto the wall behind the counter. Immediately, some music played, and a man dressed in shirt, tie, and shorts showed off the very latest in fashion for men, the manklet, a wearable ankle device for men that not only looks good, but also measures your steps, heart rate, oxygen, stats, body temperature, and much more. Within seconds of a Manklet advert playing, Zack called out, "Next message, please." Instantly, the machine obliged. Muttering to himself about the machine's ability to block adverts, he watched the next message display in front of him. This time, the machine projected an image of a woman against the shop wall. She was wearing a crisp white blouse and a light grey suit, with the familiar PHPC logo emblazoned on the left pocket. In front of her, she held a shiny metal tube vertically in one hand. The tube was approximately 1 centimetre wide and 30 centimetres long. Projecting from the middle of the tube was a translucent, shimmering page from which she read, "This message is for Zack Drummond of Libros Antiques. If you are the account holder, please authenticate with your ID fob to continue with the rest of this message." The hologram paused, and Zack held his ID fob next to the machine. Instantly, the hologram resumed playback of the recorded message. "Authentication complete. My name is Agent Tammy Santel, and I am from the Paperbacks and Hardbacks Protection Commission. She looked down at the projected rod screen and read, Your PHPC license is up for renewal in 14 days. To carry on trading in paper antiquities, we require a payment of 1,350 EBITs to be available in full by the end of this month. If you cannot pay this amount, we will have no option but to fine you 50,000 EBITs. Your inventory will be confiscated, and we will revoke your license until you pay the rest of the outstanding balance. If the full amount, including the fine, is not paid within a period of a further 90 days, we will retrieve the funds from the sale of your stock. You can also apply for a lifetime license for a one-time payment of 20,000 EBITs. Please contact us to arrange immediate payment. Our number is... As the words continued, the words that Agent Santel said sounded quieter and even became a sort of low mumble, slowly turning into unrecognizable background sounds as Zack gazed into the blur of books on the shop walls and tried to work out how he could afford the rest of this month's license. Work had not always been slow, but the nature of his work meant that he spent 80% of his time searching for books and the rest of the time selling them, and because of the rarity of the books, each one was priced at an amount which meant a few sales being able to cover the whole PHPC license and then a few more to make a profit. Selling expensive books was difficult. No one came to this side of town anymore, and advertising didn't seem to work for him as well as it could. Rent wasn't a problem since the shop had been left to him in the original owner's will. His old boss and only real friend as a teenager, old Jim Frade, who had taught Zack the business from the ground up ever since his first visit to the shop. They got on so well, Zack often thought of him as the father he no longer had. That first visit to the shop he remembered well. It was a warm, sunny day, and Zack had come to New Haven with his mother and brother and had spent some of the day touring the area. The electric buses that drove on the road, how old-fashioned! He remembered the smell of the traffic, that old, familiar smell of rubber and warm electric motors. That time of the surprise picnic in the park where his mother had left a blanket on the grass. He remembered the picnic hamper and the flavour of the smoked ham and mayonnaise sandwiches with watermelon for afters. And he remembered his dad was not there. At that point, Zack had reached his teenage years, and the childish things seemed so far away now. He wanted to do something meaningful in his life, and from the moment he walked into Mr. Frade's shop, he saw the books and breathed in that old paper smell. He was hooked. The aroma of fresh coffee filled Zack's nostrils, drawing him back to real life. He placed the parcels on the counter, walked over to the coffee pot, and poured himself a cup. Zack had only just picked up his coffee cup when the shop bell rang and a woman entered the shop. She was a young woman, rather well-to-do and out of fashion for this side of town, wearing expensive clothes. As she walked around the shop, perusing the titles on the shelves, her perfume filled Zack's nostrils. "Excuse me," she said in a quiet voice. "I noticed in the window that you have bed springs, summer, autumn, and winter, yet I don't see it on the shelf. That sort of literature isn't usually put on the general displays. Let me just grab that for you." He tapped into the computers and looked up the code of the book. After a few moments in the back room, he returned to the shop floor. The woman was holding the parcels he had just been delivered. Are these for sale?" she asked, looking at the packages. "I have to catalogue them first. They will be available from this afternoon onwards," replied Zack with a smile. The woman put the books back onto the counter, and Zack placed the book from the back room onto a burgundy velvet mat. Carefully and with gloved hands, Zack opened the book's protective bioplastic jacket. She marvelled at the quality of the pages. Next, she inspected the book and asked it to be gift wrapped. Sorry, I've run out. I'll be back in just one moment." He put the book behind the till, then went out into the back, coming out a moment later with a roll of wrapping. He wrapped the book, she paid for it, and then left. The parcels weren't much to look at. One was a large rectangular parcel, wrapped in see-through bioplastic acrylic. Zack could see a small stack of books and a letter, and another wrapped in plain brown paper with the words Mr. Z. Drummond written on the front in a computer-typed label. The first parcel was obvious. Looking at the 3 books inside, he smiled at the copy of the sweet and savoury recipe book of yesteryear, flipped it over, and behind it spotted the history of the frozen wasteland, a book about the Arctic, and that copy of Blake Gladwell, Bionic Detective, Episode 4, which he slid into a protective, clear, bioplastic jacket and added to the growing collection of Blake Gladwell books already on the shelf. Next, he drew his attention to the last book. Plain brown paper was unusual to see these days, very expensive and incredibly rare. The events of that morning had happened so quickly that he couldn't even remember signing for it. Examining it, he looked for a postcard or sender's address, and was surprised to find that it didn't have either. On the front of the packet there were 2 words, "For Zack." Inside the parcel was a small book, leather bound, approximately 4 inches wide, 6 inches tall, and about 1 inch thick, which still looked as new as it had on his 10th birthday when his father had given it to him. On the front was just one word in the centre of an embossed gold frame: Journal. The only thing written inside the diary was his name. He remembered wanting so much to treat it as his best friend and fill it with various writings, feelings, poetry, texts, and important things to write about. But now all he wanted to do was write sad things about how he was missing his father and how angry he was at his mother. Last time he had seen this book was at school on that horrible day, and he had always wondered what happened to it. This was one book he would never want to lose again. He packed it up and put it in his pocket. After he had finished cataloguing the books, Zack put them into protective bioplastic jackets, marked their prices, and arranged them in the vacuum flow sterilized vacuum fridge. He poured himself another coffee, and the familiar sound of the shop door tinkled as a man who Zack recognized as a collector entered the shop. They chatted for a while, and the man bought 3 books, made a few inquiries, and then left. By the end of the day, he'd sold several books amounting to a generous turnover. Zack was happy that he could afford this month's bill, and even though he was still struggling with the payment for the PHPC license fee, he decided to close the shop earlier than usual. He locked the door and took his journal with him, knowing it would be safer back at his department. The weather was pleasant, so he walked, taking in the evening air and enjoying the feeling of a good day's work done. Not much happened on the way home, in fact, not that he could remember, because the journey seemed to go so fast. He was too busy thinking about the journal and everything it contained, its history, the note from his mum, and the book it came in. And then he remembered it was his birthday, the fun times he used to have with his parents, and the smile turned to sadness as he remembered the tragedy of the Hayworth Dam and the big flood. The next moment he knew he was closing the front door of his apartment building.